Hi there, welcome to lesson 6. Today we're going to cover stage 4 impact phase for the improvement size methodology. Okay, from the improvement size framework, you can see that the impact phase requires you to measure and record the effects of the changes that you have successfully implemented during the intervention phase. So these so-called changes or the outcomes can be actually measured or documented using a run chart or the statistical process control charts. So outcome measures can be classified according to the 6 dimension of healthcare quality by the NHS Scotland, or you can also use the IHI outcomes domains. So for the impact phase, there are 2 objectives. One is for you to measure and validate the project outcomes that you have done, and the second thing is to document the lessons learned during the project. So the first steps involve you measuring and validating the project outcomes. You need to do so because you need to provide evidence whether the intervention has resulted in an improvement, and 2, also provide the evidence, right, to justify whether you can implement these changes permanently. So one of the most common ways to demonstrate whether your project has achieved successful outcomes, right, is actually to use this run chart to see how your PDSA cycle has led to improvement in the change that you want to see. So this is an example of how it looks like. So from the diagram, we can see that the run chart is basically just a line chart of data plotted over time. And we have learned this in lesson 4 as well. So the use of the run chart is basically to depict the process performance or data values over time. And doing so allows us to have a more accurate conclusion rather than just summary statistics. So the next video we're going to show you is to teach you how to develop write up a run chart. So let's have a look.
When you open up the run chart template in Excel, you'll see various tabs or sheets. The first one is the actual templates where you can enter your data and the chart will grow automatically. Then we have some examples of run charts, how to interpret a run chart. And then there is a tab regarding statistical process control charts and the templates that you use for QI macros. And then there's some instructions on how you can manually create a run chart from scratch. When you have some data, the next step is to create a run chart in Excel, and you can either use the templates on the CSE website or in the QUID system. When you open up the Excel run chart template, you scroll down past the definition and instructions, and what you'll find are several table templates and their corresponding charts. You need to decide which table template to use, which will depend on the type of data you have. So if you've got percentage data, count data, or rate-based data, there are particular tables to use. Or you've got continuous or variable data, such as a measure of time in hours or minutes or weeks, or money or throughput. There are other templates there to use. All you do is simply key your data into the appropriate template, and the corresponding chart will build automatically. Then you need to follow the instructions to tidy up the chart, in other words, do a bit of chart hygiene. So what would you key into the tables? So for this example here, we're looking at the number of fall incidents by month. So in this column, we would put in the dates, the months, and then the next column we'd put in the number of incidents, and actually name this column, say it's number of fall incidents. Then you can put in your stretch goal, which we've got here as 2. The areas in grey, they actually don't need any information keyed into it. They are already set, so don't touch those. Then you can also put in here your change ideas that you tested via PDSA to keep that as a record of what you did and when. Then with your chart, you go into your chart, which will have grown and built automatically. You key into these little boxes, these annotation boxes, the exact information about each PDSA. Then also put in the title and also the definition of what you're looking at if you think that is required. And it's as simple as that. I'm now in the run chart template, and there's a definition of what a run chart is, and then there's the steps to follow to build your run chart, and then there's different templates. This is a run chart if you've got percentage data, in other words classification data where you've got a numerator and denominator. This is one where you have got count data, or looking at, say, the number of incidents, in a time period. This template is when you want to use incident rates per 1,000 occupied bed days, for example. And this template is for continuous data, such as the measures of hours, minutes, time, height, weight, volume, or throughput. Just going to do a demonstration on how easy these charts grow when you enter your data. So we're just going to continue on here. Excel is clever because it can follow a pattern. So there are the months for the chart. I'm just going to put in some data. I'm just going to make this data up. You can see the graph growing automatically. Then if you click on the chart, then you need to put in the information about your PDSAs and when they occurred, and you can move those around. Also, you'll need to give it a title, and here we've put the definition in already that what a fall actually is. So that's how easy it is to create a chart in Excel using these templates. If you'd like to create your own run chart from scratch in Excel, follow these instructions from A to L, so you don't have to use the templates in Quids or the templates on the CSC website.
So how do we interpret a run chart meaningfully? So there are 3 tips that I can share with you. The first tip is actually to make sure that you have at least 10 data points for your run chart. Okay, so it can be the form of 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 months. So as long as you have 10 observation points, right, you should be fine. Then the second tip I want to share with you is that to make sure that when you write up your so-called run chart, you analyze your data based on the PDSA cycle that you have implemented. Yeah, so that will help you to be able to see trends following your PDSA changes. And the third tip I want to share with you is to understand trends. So you need to understand what's the difference between shift, trend, and astronomical data points, which are all signals about whether your changes has led to improvement or even make it worse. So this will help you to have a better understanding of all the process that you have done for your project. So what is a shift? A shift in the process is indicated by 6 or more consecutive data points, either all above or below the center point, which is the mean or the average or the so-called medium. And then any values on the central line do not add to or break a shift itself. So what is a trend? A trend is indicated by 5 or more consecutive data points that are all going up or down. So let's say, for example, you have a break in between, right? Then it cannot be considered a trend. Okay, so finally, what is an astronomical point? It's basically a data point that's obviously very different. We consider it an outlier. So when you have an outlier or detected an outlier, right, the thing you need to do is to maybe to discuss with the team whether this happens by chance, by random, or is it something that is very significant that warrants our attention. So you have to actually discuss with the team and decide whether this is a one-time thing, and whether it's going to be significantly impacting your project or not. Yeah. So after you have developed the run chart, your team can actually meet with your sponsor to decide whether the so-called project has achieved significant so-called positive outcomes. If so, then the next step to do is actually to document lesson learned. So what are lesson learned all about? Lesson learned are the learning gained from your process of conducting the project. So this lesson can be derived from your own project experience as well as your team members' experience. So there are several benefits to do so. First of all, it trains you. It allows you to make better decisions next time. It also helps your companies to prevent them from making the same mistake again and again. It also allows other people, right, to learn from you and take advantage of organizational best practice. Finally, right, it also can be used to set the stage for future projects. Well, there are several approaches you can use to document lesson learned. Today, I'm just going to share with you 2 approaches. One is the Gibbs reflective cycle, and the other one is called the PMBOK. So let us start off with the Gibbs reflective cycle. I think most of you are familiar with the Gibbs cycle. It's basically a 6-step reflective cycle that comprises of description, feelings, evaluation, analysis, conclusion, and action plans. Well, the advantages of Gibbs reflective cycle is that it provides you a step-by-step instruction about how to generate lesson learned. So it's quick and easy for you to administer. Well, the disadvantages is that it did not provide you a very fixed way to document how to so-called write a proper lesson learned. This diagram shows you the Gibbs reflective cycle. I'm going to show you a very useful video which shows you the different stages of the cycle as well as how to write for each stage of the so-called cycle. So let's have a look.
Gibbs reflective cycles. Why critical reflection matters? Reflection is a metacognitive process that occurs before, during, and after situations with the purpose of developing greater understanding of both the self and situations, so that the future encounters with the situations are informed from previous encounters. The word reflection is widely used in a variety of different contexts, from physics to education, but the meaning is all remain true to its Latin origins, to bend or to turn back. This is one of the adult learning skills that is needed in the 21st century skills. Basically, reflection is looking at yourself in the mirror. Deeper learning about your action in a certain situation and understanding its outcome has a larger magnitude in your self-improvement and lifelong learning rather than just aiming for certain skills or knowledge. Critical reflections forms the basis of adult learning, which means you will need it for your personal and professional growth. There are many ways to do reflection. One of them that we will discuss right now is the Gibbs reflective cycles. The Gibbs reflective cycle consists of 6 interdependent steps to help us focus on what is really important in the reflection process. Step 1 is the description. Step 2 is the emotion. Step 3, evaluation. Step 4, analysis. Step 5, conclusion. Step 6 is actual plan. Now, we will discuss each step a little further. Step 1, description. The question to guide you in step 1 is, what happened? In this step, you describe your experience from an event or situation where your personal or professional belief is being challenged. However, you are going through a lot. How do you know which one should be critically reflected? This is how to find what event to be critically reflected. First, mindful monitoring. Regularly making notes of your thoughts and emotions, whether it is in text, voice, or videos. You imagine yourself making a vlog or journal for yourself. You can also find it from others' feedback. Friends tell you when your face is dirty. Ask them what needs to be improved from you, and you will find what things is to be critically reflected. The other way to find is to recognize the critical incidents. When things don't go according to your plan, or an event that leaves you with strong emotions, good or bad, that is a cue for you to do a critical reflection. Tips for step number 1. Describe the experience accurately in details. It to your trusted friend. Now we are going to step 2, emotion. The question to guide you in step 2 is, how did it make you feel? In this step, you need to identify and recognize the emotion you felt related to the experience. You can use keywords like happy, liberated, wholesome, peaceful, content, proud, love, enlightened, or cheerful to describe your positive emotion. Or you can also use the word like sad, angry, desperate, helpless, depressed, anxious, indifferent, numb, etc. to describe your negative feelings. Tips for step number 2. Be specific about your emotion. Narrow it down using the closest adjective. We are going to discuss step 3. Evaluation. The guiding question for this step is, what is good and bad about the experience? In this step, you need to find the meaning and the lessons in the events or situations that you are describing. Describe what went well and what is not. For example, if you are late to a meeting, then you can describe what went well, what did you endure, and what did you overcome. Tips for step number 3. Try to draw a silver lining in bad moments and look for the pitfall in success story. Find both sides and embrace them in your reflection. It does not have always be a negative experience, but it can also be a positive event. Okay, step 4, analysis. The guiding question for this step is, what can you learn from the event? You can ask questions like, what information or skill am I lacking on how to address this problem? Do I know how to improve it? If I do not know, who can I ask for it? Or other questions like, what is the underlying reason why the identified issue was not resolved? What was my problem in resolving the problem? Tips for step number 4. Seek for reasoning or explanation behind the why question. You can also identify other circumstances that cause a similar feeling or outcome with the situation you are reflecting and try to explain the cause on that circumstances. Okay, step 5. The guiding question for this step is, could you have done things differently? The answer should only yes or no. Whatever your answer is, this part contains the important message you want to convey to yourself and others. Ponder upon your experience and think which part will bring you a better result. Tips for step number 5. Even when you think the answer to the question, could you have done differently, is no, there are always alternatives of how you could have responded differently in the event for better outcome. List the alternatives. At the heart of reflection is the challenge and subsequent change in perspective that can inform future action. The last step in 6-step GIBS reflective cycle is the actual plan. After identifying the problems, how we felt about it, and what can we learn from those circumstances, now we are going to develop an actual plan on how we can solve the problem or improve the outcomes. The guiding question for this step is, if it happens again, what will you do? This part will require you to concretely identify your learning needs and developing a plan to meet those needs. Tips for step 6. Make it SMART. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Now that we have learned all the 6 steps of GIBS reflective cycles, it is time for you to practice. You can watch the video once again. You can also read the manual book, and also you can ask directly to your facilitators if you feel there is still unclear or there is still burning questions about reflection. Happy learning!
Now, I hope you find the so-called video useful for your write-up for the lesson learned using the GIBS reflective cycle. Another approach that you may want to consider using is the PMBOK guide on lesson learned. It's a 5-stage process most commonly used in the project management so-called field. It allows you to generate and deposit lesson learned for each project. So this 5-stage comprises of identify, document, analyze, store, and retrieve. And it basically uses 3 key questions to generate so-called the lesson learned for each stage of the project. So the 3 questions are, what went wrong, what went right, and what needs to be improved. The advantages of using the PMBOK approach is that it's very thorough and detailed, and it provides you a very proper structure about generating lesson learned. But however, the problem with this is can be very time consuming and not suitable for short projects like ours. So let's have a look at the next slide. So this is how the PMBOK lesson learned process look like. In comparison to the GIBS reflective cycle, the PMBOK actually focuses on 2 more steps, which is the last 2 steps, store and retrieve. Okay, why do they prescribe that? Is because they want to facilitate organizational learning. So the emphasis on PMBOK, right, is actually to not just generate findings, but they want you to store the lesson learned in a repository that is easy for the rest to go and look at it and find out, because they hope that other people can actually benefit from so-called the lessons that you have learned from your project. So the next video will show you how to generate the lesson learned for using the PMBOK format.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Witt, Director of ProjectManager.com. Welcome to our whiteboard session today on how to capture lessons learned at the end of a project. Well, I want to clarify one thing. I'm usually asked about how to do this at the end of the project, but there are little idiosyncrasies that I want to tell you about all along the way through the project, because lessons learned is one of the greatest gifts that you can have throughout the project. So to clarify why is a lesson learned can occur, it can be an event or something happening all along the way of the project, and usually there's either a positive result or a negative result. So with the positive result of the lesson learned, it's something that you've found that you want to continue doing. It's like, let's do this again, versus something with a negative result where you're like, oh no, just stop, never, we don't ever want to do this again. So it typically impacts the cost, the time, the scope, the quality, maybe the process. Maybe you've determined where there's a point in the process that's bad or needs to be improved, or hey, this worked really well. And it may impact the morale of the team. So when do you do this? Again, I'm always asked how to do this at the end of the project, but we recommend that this is to be done throughout the entire project. So from the beginning to the end of the project, it's an iterative process that you're constantly reviewing. Constantly reviewing things along the way. You may want to incorporate milestones throughout the project where you do a checkpoint and review. But you don't have to wait until a meeting to discuss the lessons learned. Again, you as a project manager, you're observing, always looking, always listening, always responding to. So how do we do this? Again, we document the lessons learned throughout the entire project. And we do this through a lessons learned log. So we actually keep a literal log of all of the lessons we've learned along the way. And we're doing this real time, continually. And then as the lesson occurs, to document it, document what that lesson was, and determine, was this a positive result? Was this a negative result? Is this something we want to carry over and do again? Or is this something we never want to do again? So how do we do that? We get that information through input, comments from meetings we have, from the water cooler. You can get great information from the water cooler about what's really working and what's not. Someone may send you an email on comments or something that they experienced and how that impacted them. It could be something, maybe someone called you, or something that even comes in through the customer service line. So being able to capture that, lessons learned all along the way, and remembering that just because you document this doesn't mean you document and just put it on a log. You're always discussing this with your meetings, your teams, your stakeholders, and you don't have to wait until the end to do action. If you find something that really works to improve a process, to positively impact this, you want to do it now, do it real time. And then for sure, if it's something negatively impacting, you don't want to wait to the end. You want to assess and you want to respond now. This is something we can stop doing now. And then at the end of the project, you want to capture the lessons learned. Okay, so we have our lessons learned log. And then at the end of the project, it's one of the closeout things that we do. So how do we do this? We solicit feedback, input, comments, the same as we do here. And we also, I think a great idea is capturing this information, distributing it out to the team. You can do it through surveys, and you can also solicit feedback on other lessons learned and also have them to go back and reassess. You know, you or a certain subset of your team or stakeholders may think this was a positive impact or a negative impact, but other people may not. So at the end, kind of scrubbing the information, you can do it by focus meetings, focus meeting. You can have your lessons learned meeting. And you can do that online now with social media. We can do that through social media channels. You can have a web meeting, you can have a conference call, or you can do it offline. If you have the luxury of being able to see your team face to face, you might have a lessons learned meeting where all of your team members, stakeholders attend, where you capture this information, or you can go visit different sites. So maybe you have different teams in different locations, you can do that. And you're capturing this information anonymously, because some lessons learned that are negative, you always want to document the result or the lesson. You don't have to say that he said, she said. You want to keep that anonymous so people will feel free to give you true, real feedback. And then once that's done, once you go back and solicit additional information for lessons learned, you want to document it, review it. You as a project manager, review it, make sure everything's documented properly. And then maybe you want to summarize the lessons and you may actually say, here are the lessons learned. These are the ones that we found helpful. We're going to take forward and do again. These are the ones that we found had a negative impact. We're going to be sure to stop and change, and here's how we're going to change it. And you distribute that to the appropriate team members or your stakeholders. And again, being sure to incorporate those lessons all along the way.
Okay, we have come to the end of this lesson. So in summary, you have learned about how to use a run chart to measure and validate the so-called project outcomes. And the second thing you have learned is actually to use either the Gibbs reflective cycle or the PMBOK model, right, to actually document lesson learned for organizational learning purposes.